Hi, I'm Randall from Randall's ESL Cyber Listening Lab, providing tips on language learning, culture, and human development. And today we have a very insightful guest with us, and we are going to be talking about the idea of fostering understanding and inclusion of religion in the classroom. And I think one of the greatest, to introduce this topic, I think one of the greatest experiences of our lives can come from learning and participating in the rich cultural traditions and diversity of our world neighbors. This includes their customs, their food, their values, their dreams, even their sorrows. And I think in many places in the world, I think the faith traditions of people really are at the center of who they are, of their lives. And yet the topic of religion often seems to produce a mix of emotions. Unfortunately, discussing religion can be viewed sometimes as a hot topic like politics that should be handled with care from afar, like stained glass or grandma's fine china. Yet, I feel that teachers and students can really find meaningful ways of connecting with others in talking about people's religious values, traditions, life events that actually elevate our understanding, leading to a more enriching connection with others around the world. And I think what we're trying to do is discuss the skills of connecting and talking about religion versus evangelizing a particular point of view. And one particular book that I enjoy, it's called Faith Ed, Teaching About Religion in an Age of Intolerance. I'll put this book in the actual show notes, which addresses this topic in schools as well. And so that's what we're going to be addressing. And I think to address this topic, we certainly want to encourage participation from those of you, students and teachers, the impact that this discussion can have on you as a language teacher. So one of the things that we're going to do is, before we actually introduce our guests, we want to acknowledge other visitors: Jose from Colombia, Olga from Colombia as well, Oles from Mexico. Wow, we have Marcela from Mexico and so forth. And again, if we don't acknowledge everyone, Manuel from Ecuador, we certainly want to make you a part of this discussion. So thank you very much. So let's now, without further ado, what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring on our guest today and make sure that I get that in the right view. And I'd like to introduce today's guest. Very insightful, Nesreen Alomari, who holds a PhD in education and who teaches here in the United States. And so I'd like to welcome you, Nesreen, to our show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Right. Well, great. And you're going to introduce, of course, yourself. We're going to be engaged in a lot of different topics of conversation. So if we could just begin, Nesreen, just a personal introduction about you yourself, a little bit about your family, and then your ultimate decision to pursue teaching. And then we'll go into other topics from there.
All right, of course. So my name is Nesreen Alomari. My parents are Portuguese. I know by the way that I look, everyone assumes that I am Arab. But I am born in America, but my parents, my grandparents, my whole history is Portuguese. So that actually means I grew up Catholic. When I was 17 years old, I converted to Islam, which is why I dress like this now. I am Muslim. Let's see what else. So my decision to pursue teaching, I've always wanted to be a teacher. My mother wanted to be a teacher, but my grandma wouldn't let her go to college. So I kind of fed off of that and said, you know what, Mommy, I'll be a teacher. And it's something I've always wanted to be. And I decided that I would do a PhD in English language learning as my specialty because the way I grew up, because of things like when my daughter said, Mommy, I know what Grandpa's name is. And I go, okay, honey, what's Grandpa's name? And she goes, Unnie. And I go, oh, Grandma is actually trying to say honey with the H. But because in Portuguese, we don't pronounce our H's, she calls my father Unnie. So that was kind of my decision on why I did my PhD in that. But as far as teaching, it's something I've always wanted to do.
Great, and that's good to know. And I think good, this audience that are the audience that is joining us today, many of them are teachers, but we have many students, and it's great to see that there's that connection, of course, as well. Could you just tell us, before we get into some of the other topics, a little bit about what you do, where you teach, and some of your responsibilities?
Of course. So I teach in two different places. I teach at a local community college where I teach English as a second language. And I also teach adult education where people who just want to improve their English. So it's also an English as a second language class. So I teach in kind of same area, but two different places.
And we're going to talk about pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, what it was like before that. And then we're also going to lead into the conversation about what it looks like in the midst of the pandemic and COVID as we talk about today's topic as well. Just to look at some of the comments that are coming in, we have some hi, Randall from Tunisia. Well, welcome. It's good to have you. Riyadh, how do you handle controversial topics in class? And that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about today. And thank you, Riyadh, for bringing that up, because although we're talking about religion, that's kind of the focus. There are other topics that could come up, and so feel free to share those and how to minimize that controversy. We have Carol from Costa Rica. Welcome, Carol. And Cesar says, I send you all a big hug from El Salvador. And that's great as well. So great to have so many people joining us today. Well, let's actually get into the topic. And we're talking, and Nesreen, a little bit about pre-COVID-19, some of your experiences. And could we just talk a little bit about your students' initial reactions on the first day? I mean, they might think that you're a student. And as part of that, perhaps you can tell us, for those audience, a little bit about the difference between the hijab, niqab, and the burqa. There are other head coverings to help us understand that as well. So again, about initial reactions to your students and any information that can help us understand those differences.
Of course. So the initial reaction of students to me on the first day of class makes me laugh inside. I mean, once you get to know me, you'll see when I smile, my eyes, they squint up. But it's actually really funny to me because when people walk into the room, I'll tell them, sit anywhere. And, and they kind of go and they look around and it's fine. And then when I stand in front of the room to introduce myself as the teacher, everyone's jaw drops and they'll whisper to each other, what do you mean she's the teacher? So it's always kind of funny because of their reactions, because I am the last person that they expected in the room of people to be the teacher.
So there's kind of that assumption, well, she's not the teacher, she's just one of the students, we're waiting for the teacher. And then when you announce that, then they are quite surprised.
Right. So it's kind of like, I'm sure it's because of the way that I'm dressed. So I'm always like the elephant in the room. Once they realize that I'm the teacher, now they whisper to each other. So then I get to explain myself because there's a saying in English, don't judge a book by its cover. So I'm a very good example of that because everyone assumes that I don't speak English. So when I get in front of the class and I'm the teacher, now I get to explain I am Portuguese, which is not what they thought I am. I get to explain to them that I grew up Catholic. So that's a connection to a lot of people where I teach. There's a lot of Spanish students. So a lot of Spanish students are Catholic, Christian. There's other religions as well, of course, but there's always that connection where they thought I was so strange. And then as I talk, and there's actually a lot of connections that we make right from the beginning.
And I think what we're going to do is we're going to bring up we're going to weave this topic into our discussion about how to facilitate understanding, how to facilitate conversation. When in the beginning, it might feel a little uncomfortable, but how to break that ice a little bit better. As you mentioned, like that elephant in the room. And can you just, for the audience, a little bit of just talk about these three different, there are other terminologies certainly, but I think it could be useful as well as part of this conversation.
So the most common is the hijab, which is just a head covering, a scarf that covers just the hair, but the face is exposed.
Okay.
The niqab is what I wear, which is actually a separate piece.
Okay.
I have a hijab that covers my hair, and then I have this extra piece that covers my face. So that's the niqab. A burqa is one piece that goes over your head that has like a screen over the eyes.
Okay.
And that's kind of the differences, but hijab is the most common.
Okay. And people might ask, what is the determination? How do people decide whether they want to wear the one or the other? How is that done?
That is on religious belief, on what you're comfortable with. The religion says you have to cover your hair, but of course there are Muslim women that do not. We're all human, so we all have choices.
Yeah.
So Islam says you have to cover your hair. It's better if you cover your face, and then we have our own human choices on how, what are we comfortable following, and sometimes that changes. So when I first converted to Islam, I didn't cover my hair. It took me a couple of years. Then I started covering my hair, and then maybe 6 months after covering my hair, I said I think I better cover my face because I talk too much, and everybody talks to me after. So kind of that helps me out.
Yeah. And I appreciate your sensitivity to these issues. Certainly, we want to recognize that people have certain feelings, beliefs, how they might feel more comfortable in doing that. And certainly, we're recognizing that as well. As we go on, I just want to see some other comments. And again, these will be comments that we want to keep in mind as we start talking about this topic. Reem says, have you had some problems with pupils or their parents? Just keep this in mind because I think this will be important. How do you transfer energy from you to your student? Perhaps maybe in general. And we want to do that. Riyadh says, it happens to me as well. As I am bearded man and students find this weird, the first impression is always negative until they get used to me. And that perhaps you just mentioned there, Nasreem, a little bit when students see you initially, they're not sure how to respond. And let's keep this as a reoccurring theme today is when people see that diversity, how can we introduce that? How can we work on that as well? A comment that is brought up is how do you teach pronunciation without showing the movement of the lips? That is,
could I go ahead and answer some of these?
yes. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about those as we talk about some of these comments. And let me go back here. And again, we're going to weave all of these into our discussions today. But this one, have you had some problems with your pupils or parents? Let's talk about some of this initial reaction to what you've seen.
So from Rim or Reem, depending on, so have you had some problems with pupils or parents? Nothing. Actually, there's that initial like shock when they see me. And after I start talking, and I tell them when I introduce myself to the class, I tell them, everything that happens, and it's a daily reminder every morning. Anything that happens in the classroom, stays in the classroom. So please feel free to ask me questions, whether it's about me, about why I dress the way that I do, whether it's something in English you don't understand. The most important thing is to be comfortable in the room so that you can ask questions, because you're not going to learn if you just keep shaking your head at me, yes.
Right.
If you just know everything, it's going to be really hard for you to improve your English. I'm here not for myself. I tell them this is your classroom. This is not mine. This is yours. So I am here to help you the best that I can. That means that, we have to trust each other, and we have to understand that we need to ask questions, and every question is okay to ask.
Right. And I think that's a really important point, There was other question about how to teach pronunciation without showing the movement of your lips.
This one, I love this one. One, for technology, this helps. Pointing out other students helps. What's wonderful is many students that come to me will say, we don't hear good in English. And I explain to them, because this is what I did my dissertation on for my PhD. Then you're in the right classroom, because you're going to have to listen to me because you can't read my lips. So I tell them, by being in my class, your listening in English is going to go up a lot, because you're going to have to hear what I say. And I try to slow it down because I do talk fast. And sometimes students will be like, you're talking too fast. I'll tell them, remind me, because I get excited. I love what I do. So I get excited and I talk fast. But for pronunciation, the computer, YouTube always has stuff. So if there's certain things that students are not pronouncing right, I'll have another student model, or I can go on YouTube and do it that way. We use a great program here in my local town for adult ed that a computer program that when they don't pronounce things right, it actually has a pronunciation piece to it where it shows a video. So,
Okay.
I mean, that's helpful too.
Okay, so great ideas for either modeling, using a computer, maybe a picture or other video that allows them to see those models as well. And I think they're great. Now, the one thing is that Riyadh mentions wearing a hijab or niqab is one of the most controversial topics in Islam. You know, one of the things that certainly any of these topics, and I'm glad Riyadh is bringing this to an awareness, is how do we go about in addressing some of those things in a very sensitive and open way. And hopefully the topics that we discussed today will kind of address those as well. And so let's get into this. We're going to step it to the side a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on classroom instruction, because I think this is a topic that everyone is interested in. And then we'll weave this back into the topic of religion in the classroom. So could you describe, again, what is happening in your own classes? You're working at two different institutions. Again, this topic I think is very relevant for teachers who are trying to find their way through this difficult time.
Well, so the impact has been difficult, I guess, a little bit because of the transition for the technology, for the sake of not everybody has a computer at home. Trying to talk people through using their phone to get onto a Zoom class. So COVID kind of threw us through a loop of we weren't prepared to necessarily make sure that everybody already knew how to use their phones for class, or the computer, or how to share a screen if they want to show something. I've actually been very lucky, I guess. I've always had, and I think because of my personality, because I'm always reaching out to the students, I'm very chatty. I love to talk. So I talk to everybody and I ask people. I live in the town that I teach in. So a lot of the parents are my students. So I'll see them and be like, how are your kids? Oh, your daughter goes to school with my son at the middle school. Like,
Oh,
so
good.
I have that added connection. So I actually have the highest attendance out of all the classes that are in town, which is wonderful. I'm hoping that's because of my personality. But so for COVID, most of my students did end up doing online. And the couple that started and said, you know what, I have too much background noise. I can't focus. My kids are home because of COVID. They let me know. So at least, I kind of relayed that message to, I have 12 students instead of 15 because these three, their kids or whatever the issue was communicated that they could not attend class online.
Right.
It wasn't working.
Okay. And I think you mentioned, as you were talking about your personality, I think this is relevant to anyone, of having a certain personality, of being approachable, where people can approach you. And I think that's the same thing, going back to that question about pronunciation. If people feel that you're very approachable and you have all these tools in your toolbox, the computer, models, being approachable, I think really helps in facilitating connection. And I think that's what we're talking about, is this human connection with people in so many different ways.
And someone said, how do you share your energy? That's how I do it.
Okay, well, that's great.
I'm very
That's super.
outgoing. So that's how I share my energy, and I make sure that I get everyone feeling me.
And I'm glad that you're engaging with the audience of answering this question. Certainly, we're encouraging people to share their topic. And let's now move on to why we're the main focus of the presentation. And again, I'm Randall from Randall's ESL Cyber Listening Lab with Nazreen Al-Omadi, talking about the topic of religion in the classroom. And we want to hear your voices about this topic. So let's talk about this. Just why is religion viewed as a hot topic, like something that is like so fragile that we are often uncomfortable about discussing it?
So I think it's viewed as a hot topic for a couple of reasons. One is, as adults, we probably grew up with our parents telling us, you don't talk about religion. I know I did. My father used to say, you don't talk about religion to other people. And I think that mentality kind of builds walls instead of tearing them down. I also think that sometimes people will talk religion in a way that they're not trying to just tell you in general, where sometimes people might talk to you trying to maybe convert you. And that's kind of where people start to feel uncomfortable, because learning about religion is wonderful. It's about learning about people. That's what makes people people. That's how we're connected, is by learning about the differences we have.
Right. And so the idea, I think you just mentioned, I think people feel uncomfortable and don't see often the distinction between talking about religion, teaching about religion and teaching religion, where everyone automatically feels, oh no, I'm going to be evangelized to. So someone's using this discussion to evangelize a particular position, and that's not what we're discussing at all. Right. And I think that's the idea of teaching about religion versus teaching religion. Is that what you're saying as well?
Yes, absolutely. I
Okay.
think by teaching about religions, it's the same as teaching about cultures, because I think the world at this point is very multifaceted. There's a lot of different cultures. I think anywhere you go. Granted, I'm sure there's still pockets where if you go to a certain countries, there's still pockets where everyone is still very the same. But I think the diversity of the world and the way that people have move around with much more ease now, that there's more multiculturalism, which means that there's different cultures, which also brings different religions.
Yeah.
But it's easier to understand one another when we understand that there are differences, and that's okay. We can agree to disagree.
Yeah. And the idea of religion, as you just mentioned, we live in a world where there's a lot of religious pluralism, that we need to be sensitive to that. And certainly, I think Nazreen and I would be interested not only in this topic about religion and why it can be controversial or difficult, but also I think, Nazreen, we would be interested in what limitations there are around the world to introduce or to allow religious topics to surface organically in the classroom. Are there within your schools restrictions or policies that might limit what you can and cannot talk about? I think is important. Nazreen, let's bring in some comments here that we've seen. We had Riyadh says, we read this before. He says, I'm a bearded man. Students find this weird. The first impression is always negative. We talked a little bit about that. We have some other visitors, Omar from the UAE, United Arab Emirates, someone else from Vietnam, Christian from Colombia as well. Mesa says she's from the United Arab Emirates. She says teaching in the U.S. and keeping your hijab is really a courageous decision. You're a person with a strong personality, I guess. So do you find that it's difficult to balance that in your community, whether it be in the United States or in your community, to continue that religious practice? How have you found that to balance that in your own life?
So, this I always find interesting, and I think I finally over the years come up with the answer. Just something I left out of my background. When I was 21, I got married to a man from Jordan. So my in-laws are all Jordanian. So,
thanks for adding that part of your story. I think that's important.
So sometimes, things are, comments are made not just by my husband's family about, people from the community about, like around 9/11, prior to me getting married, women were taking off their hijab. And I'm like, absolutely not. I'm American. And I think that's where maybe I'm different. I walk around with my head up high and I say hello to everyone. It drives my kids crazy. You don't know that person. Why you ask them, hi, how are you? And I walk around like I'm everybody else, because I feel like I am like everybody else. So I think that when people come from other countries to America, maybe there's that slight feeling, maybe they feel like they don't belong, which you do. If you came here, you belong here.
Right.
We all have a right to live, somewhere. So I think that might be the little difference, is that I think maybe when someone immigrates to the United States, they might feel like, oh, well, maybe I have to assimilate. Maybe I'm not comfortable. Someone's going to bother me. I don't have that. And I really believe it's because I was born here. So I walk around, I belong here. And if someone says something to me, I'll stop them and I'll say, excuse me, what did you mean? And the moment they hear me, like, I stop to them and I can ask them, like, what, you speak English? That also throws people off, because there's always that assumption as well that I don't speak English.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you're modeling right now is the ability to exude, not only, I think Riyadh says, brilliant, you seem confident enough, keep up the good work. I think what we're trying to do is I think people see this is a barrier, unfortunately, to greater communication. Yet what we find is that there's a lot more similarities between people than differences. And by opening up, like you've just modeled, and asking questions, then I think people say, you know what? Nazreem is just like me in so many ways. All right. And I shouldn't allow the differences of, maybe, as Riyadh mentioned, the beard or the way we dress to inhibit our ability to connect with other people. Another comment comes in. Khan says, I always tell my students, I want you to understand English news, even if they are not in the room. They need to learn how to understand English without having face-to-face interaction. So maybe that is in a way similar. Well, maybe they can't actually fully see what you're saying, but you've modeled already, Nazreem, different ways which people can share. Riyadh says, thank you so much, Randall, for raising a great topic. Our religious belief will never prevent us from being social. Nazreem is a great model, all right, of that. I think that's a great. Riyadh also says religion is a hot topic, even among people of the same religion, let alone people of different religions. Now, Nazreem, I think this is a great comment from Riyadh, because sometimes I found that the greatest tension I ever feel in the classroom are from people from the same religious tradition versus not. And I'm not sure if you have any thought or comment on that.
I think I do. I think the most important thing is to remember, regardless of religion, because whether it's the same or different, we're all human. So we all make our own choices, right? So
Right.
maybe we read the same book, regardless of what it is, but our perspectives are different. Or even if I read what you read and I understand it, maybe I don't want to. Maybe I
Yeah.
don't want to. So it's that trying to boil any kind of hot topic down to, you know what, we're all human.
Yeah.
So we all have choices. So in the classroom, it's kind of bringing it down to, we're all human. So let's just share everybody's, opinion, or, what they do in their cultures or religions, to kind of bring that out, so that instead of going, ooh, that's weird, because I think that's what happens when something is different. It's weird and ew, weird. So it kind of gives people a chance to get over their initial reaction and kind of go, oh, human reaction, humanity. Oh, now we can see things a little different.
And I think what Riyadh said is that you're a great model of that. And perhaps this will lead into actual specifics. I think people are interested. We've talked a little bit about why it's a hot topic, a little bit about difference between teaching religion and teaching about it. But let's talk about incorporating religious diversity. How can this come up in terms of religious traditions, life events, holidays, that any teacher, no matter where you are in the world, and we're speaking to students too today, that how can you take part in this type of discussion with fellow students? So can we think about certain ways and examples of incorporating religious diversity in the classroom?
Of course. So incorporating religious diversity could be something like acknowledging that there's holidays coming up, right? As far as just bare basics, like, someone's holiday is coming up. Maybe they vocalized it. Maybe you researched it, knowing that maybe you have a Hindu student, or, maybe someone's communicated that they have a holiday coming up. I know as a Muslim in America, I always have to let the teachers know for my kids, like Eid is coming. My kids will not be on school that day, and try to make sure there's no testing or anything being done.
Now let's pause for that. That will be a new concept to many people. Many people have heard Ramadan, and so which is one of the 5 pillars of the faith. But talk about Eid, so that you're talking as if everyone knows, and we understand. But I think that could be very relevant to many people, and so forth.
Right.
And again, we're not speaking just of this holiday, but it is an example.
Right. So in Islam, we actually have 2 Eids, which Eid just simply translates to holiday.
Okay.
But they move. Here's the problem that I find that in America, because it's not like Christmas. It's not December 25th. It's not a specific day. It moves because we follow a lunar calendar.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always very difficult to kind of let the teachers know, because it's not a specific day that everyone in the world has kind of memorized.
Like on the 25th.
Right. So that's kind of the little difficulty with it, is to follow that lunar calendar, which no one follows, because we all, most of us follow the Gregorian calendar, which follows the sun. And the problem is letting them know. So those two holidays, I specifically have to go to the schools, or I send emails and be like, oh, this holiday's coming up. Teachers are really great about bringing books. It's Eid al-Fitr after Ramadan, and they'll bring in books about Ramadan when my kids are fasting. That's kind of like some of the on the surface, I guess, easier stuff. I know
Right.
that there's other books, for Kwanzaa, for students who celebrate Kwanzaa, for other religions as well. I'd like to share a story for incorporating religious diversity
Okay.
from in my own classroom. I had a student from Nigeria, a woman who, like I said, I like to talk a lot. So she was very comfortable with letting me know that, her brother had died, and, she had shared what they do. So I forgot if it was over the summer. So she was just sharing with me and sharing with the class, because a lot of the class has been with me the past few years. They just kind of keep signing back up. So it was really nice. She said that, they take the body, they take it to the church. The women wear bright colors, they sing and dance to celebrate the person's life. And I had so many students go, ah, what do you mean? Like, the person died. How are you singing and dancing? And she's trying to explain. I go, no, no, no. I said, they're celebrating life. And I explained, I understand, as like Catholics, because I have a lot of Spanish students who are Catholic. I said, could someone explain? Because I know as Portuguese, you wear black, you're sad, go to the church, to do the prayer at the church, you go bury the body. I understand that. And then I went around the room, having my students from Peru explain, my students from Ecuador, from Ghana, all the different, stories of how do you, when someone dies, what do you do? What's your religion do? What is your, because religion and culture in many countries kind of intertwine. Not that they're the same, they are definitely different, but they kind of intertwine. So, what do you do? And then as I went around the room, that shock of celebration of life dissipated. It went down, and people started to go, oh, because that person, you have a lot of happy memories about that person. Whoever passed away, you have happiness. You're sad that they're gone, yes, but in Nigeria they celebrate the life, so there's singing, there's dancing, there's bright colors, and that's their culture, their way of celebrating, and that's okay. And as we had the conversation, that initial shock of, oh my gosh, how can they do that,
Right.
dissipated, and there started to be an understanding. Oh, celebration, you're right, we do have a lot of happy memories of people that have passed away,
Oh,
and
and
it's
these
okay to be different.
And this is a great idea. And certainly we would encourage teachers out there and students. What are some examples of how you've incorporated religious diversity? And again, we're talking about the intermeshing of religion and culture together. What are some of the things that you have done personally that have allowed this type of topic to flourish organically in the class and bring about meaningful understanding? Please share that. And I think one of the things you mentioned about life and death. And I think what we're talking about is going beyond religious tolerance. And let me explain what I mean by that. I think that all of us, as you just mentioned and has been mentioned so far, is sometimes, well, I'm sorry, not sometimes, but often we see the world through the glasses or prism of our own understanding. And so when you mentioned about singing and dancing, for many people, it's like celebration, a marriage. But you gave an example from Nigeria where they were celebrating life. And once you get past the weird factor, I don't know how to describe that.
Mhm.
Or like you already mentioned, Nesreen, about the way that you dress and present yourself, then people say, you know what? I can see her up close. I can connect in a different way. And when I talk about tolerance, I mean, if I were to say, we use that word tolerance, but if I were to say to any of my students or to my wife, honey, we've been married 33 years and now I tolerate you. Yeah, that's not going to win any bonus points. And I think what we agree is we're talking about going beyond tolerance, going beyond that greater inclusion. And you gave a great example of that with your Nigerian student. Let's see what other comments we might have coming in. Let's see here. Here's a comment from Reen. Thanks to technology, we managed to do a lot of things. One of the good things you presented is being free to wear what you want and to practice the religion that you like without hampering the teaching process. Definitely, this requires a lot of strong personality like yours. And I think it's not just a matter of being strong. I think it's like, yeah, this is who I am. And this is what I want you to be in terms of living your life to the fullest as well. Do you have any comment about that? About being free to wear what you want and practice the religion without hampering and getting in the way of your own teaching?
Well, I think in America, America's been known as land of the free, which could be controversial in itself. But with that said, I mean, that lets everyone know that, you can wear your cultural clothes. Like the students from Ghana, sometimes they'll come in with the most beautiful, brightly colored clothes, and sometimes they wear jeans and a shirt like everybody else, so which is okay. But there's so many more comments. Like, be who you are, wear what you'd like, and you know what? It's a safe place. Like, the classroom is kind of a place where people can kind of not just learn English, but build their confidence in English so that when they walk around, hopefully they can speak up for themselves. And I encourage my students to speak to people in general outside so that they hear different dialects of English, different pronunciations, because you start to get used to one person, the same people speaking to you. But if you go to the store and ask, where's the rice? I can't find the rice. Ask someone. Don't be shy to speak, even if you're not sure if you can say it right. Try. That person's job is to help you find rice if that's the kind of store you're in, right? So it kind of helps to build that confidence. As far as hampering my teaching, I guess what's nice is that I can prove, I guess if that's the word, I can prove that it doesn't hamper my teaching. That my students, if anyone ever spoke with any of them, I know that they speak very nice things about me as a person, because I am a person.
Yeah.
The fabric on my face, on my head, doesn't change that.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point. Here's a Khan says, I think talking about religion and one's country is a good icebreaker. I have no students who love to talk about the religion. They have lots to say. I think that's a great idea. Riyadh also says, we want to teach tolerance. We should teach religion in different languages. Well, maybe that is certainly an element of that. And I think Riyadh is saying, yeah, tolerance is important. And we're talking about how can we become extremely inclusive as well. Kayla from Costa Rica says, most teachers avoid talking about religion. However, they forget that people have the possibility of talking about any topic with respect. So you can talk about politics. You can talk about religion. That's a great point, Kayla, that this, I think, is modeling not only the conversation about religion, but just about anything. I mean, if I may, there are many topics that are sensitive. One is religion, politics. I've said this before in a broadcast. My son died by suicide. And sometimes there are topics where people feel that, no, I can't talk about that. I can't approach the topic. But what you're saying, Nazreen, and what people are saying is there can be almost any topic that can be addressed with sensitivity once you see and develop that human connection. I think that's impossible. And we got many comments here. I think sometimes people feel judged. If you are X, you must think Y. So opening up the discussion in the classroom can help diffuse the way of thinking. And I think that judging, I don't know if you have any thought about being judged, and that maybe can limit our engagement with others.
I think that it's important for students to, and I use my platform as a teacher all the time for this, is that, a lot of times we come from, our understanding is the way that we're raised. And we learn more through life experiences, right? The wisdom comes with age because you learn more about things in general. I think that it's important to learn about different people, different cultures, because we're exposed to them. So instead of going, oh, look at those weird people over there. Oh, look at her. She's dressed so weird. Or look at him pointing the fingers. Ask me. You can ask me. Let's ask each other in the classroom. If there's something, ask. And let's ask and let's share. And let's go. I use Google Images all the time. That student from Nigeria, I Google imaged what they wear for their funerals and what it looks like. And it just brought a whole new perspective. So I think a lot of times those judgments happen because we've never met someone from that place, from that religion, from that culture. So everything that we've never come across is weird. And that's, for lack of a better term, it's strange, it's different.
And I think sometimes people feel if I ask a question, will the person be dismissive of the question? Will I feel stupid, for example? Now, for example, a question people might say, well, Nazreem is wearing black. And they might say, does she sometimes wear blue or pink or different colors? Those type of questions, people might feel afraid. But once again, once they know you better, I think they would be more comfortable in asking that question.
Right. And by asking. So I get a couple of common questions. Do I wear this in the house?
Mhm.
No. I have 6 kids, so I don't dress like this in the house. It wouldn't kind of make too much sense. And I'm always wearing pants under. I wear a long dress. So
Okay.
I always have usually like jeans, and I'll lift it up just a little bit because I'm covered for a reason, but I'll lift it up just
Right.
for a little bit and go, look, I wear jeans just like everyone else. Like I dress like everyone else. It's just when I go out, I choose to cover myself. This way you are forced to talk to me versus checking me out and, making whatever assumptions. Because you already looked at me and assumed that I didn't speak English or whatever it was.
Right.
So it kind of gives you a chance. So you get to meet me as a human versus me as a person.
Yeah.
Like,
And I think these are great ideas. And I think a whole different discussion would be to how do people, students, even in learning a language and using that language, develop self-confidence to be comfortable in their own skin. And that would be really hard. Here's another comment from Reem. It's high time pupils and students learn tolerance. And again, I know that as a word that we often use, tolerance. And I think what we're trying to emphasize, in addition to tolerance, is much beyond tolerance, is
understand.
really deep acceptance. I think it's just a word that we often use. And I think we agree on the same idea of going beyond that. Nayali from Mexico says, to talk about religion, respect is key. Very good point. Isra from the United Arab Emirates says, to build strong relationships between the teacher and the student when they share their thoughts and feelings about everything, especially when they participate in the religious celebration, a feeling that they can share, that they won't be judged. That comes back to that idea as well. Amadi says, nice job, Nesreen. I dress like Nesreen in the classroom. Oh, Amani, would you feel comfortable in sharing where let's see. Oh, wait, I had a few issues with students or parents here in Connecticut. Is this by chance someone you know?
It is someone I know.
Okay. So thank you, Amani. And that would be, had a few issues with parents. It would be interesting to understand that better. And I don't think we can ever eliminate that, but I certainly in exuding openness. So when people respond, how we respond back to them. Riyadh has another comment. What kinds of topics do you talk about in class? Do you deal with controversial topics as debate activity?
Okay.
So
So that's a good question. So what kinds of topics in class? I teach English, so I go through the normal English stuff. I also try to make sure that we do some reading with some books from different cultures. That kind of helps trigger conversations. Um, like I said, I always talk with my students. So I always, ask, how's everyone doing? How are your kids? What's new? What did you do over the weekend? So that kind of helps people talk. So then I get to hear about weddings and people, they have a new grandchild or someone had a baby. You get to hear a lot of that, or if someone died, you hear the happy stuff, the sad stuff. There's more of that sharing, which
right.
allows, other people in the classroom to share as well to help build understanding. With anything that's controversial, I don't really consider it a debate activity. We bring it up to bring understanding, because I kind of feel like a debate is trying to prove which side of the argument is better, stronger, correct. I don't know what way, but I wouldn't say debate. I have no problem with anything controversial. Every so often politics come up depending what's going on in the news. And I don't shy away. I know some teachers may, that some people might kind of say, oh, let's change gears, but I don't. I let my students vent. I let them say it. Anyone agree, disagree, and we can talk about it. some things we can't change, but we can definitely get the words out. And if it's also a great chance for me that if, as they're trying to explain their feelings, if they're not, if they're missing some words, or I'll repeat it with some different words to make sure that everyone kind of understands. It helps build vocabulary as well. So I wouldn't use debate, but I definitely love anything controversial because it gets people's feelings going, which gets their words coming out a little more fiery, where some people might be a little shy. Everyone has opinions, especially when it's controversial.
Right. And I think along with this, it's important, for example, to teach the skills of listening. Because I think sometimes when we get into the topics of religion, politics, or whatever it might be, sometimes what we do is we don't listen to understand. We're only listening to respond. So you can see when you're talking to the person, their mind is churning with ideas because, okay, Randall's going to finish talking here in about 2 minutes, and I'm going to unload on him my opinions. And I think what you're saying and what I'm saying is that a lot of it has to do with tone. Okay. Is the person really trying to listen to my opinions? And I think that's where that feeling of defensiveness, like people are getting out of their bunkers with their bayonets ready to attack. And that I think you can have meaningful questions about religion without feeling like you have to defend every point. Here is another. Here's another point. It says society, and I apologize, I can't read the name. Society has got a lot to answer for stereotyping people only because of their appearance. You're giving an excellent model that interaction and communication have a lot to do with creativity and competence than merely with facial expressions and above. All of your love and passion for what you do. I'm from Tunisia. That's a very gracious comment. And I think what you're modeling too is that, you know what? I've had students that say, I'm not sure about the way I dress, whether I wear a tie to church, whether I wear a white shirt, a purple shirt, because of the feelings of judgment. And I think if we can establish a feeling of, I find you and I see you whole, just the way you are. I don't need you to change to be what I am, I think could be a key as well. We got some other comments. This is a long comment, but I think I always make a calendar with my class of all the celebrations, those that fall in our session. Then we celebrate and learn about specific holiday. I look for lessons on each holiday to do some research. Students love to see pictures, Google about their celebrations. So when we personalize it, I think can be great as well. Well, we're getting a lot of comments, and I wish we could answer all of these. And certainly what Nezreen and I will do is answer some of those in the after show notes on Facebook. What we like to do is we'd like to talk about a couple more ideas before we end. Certainly the idea of providing accommodations for students, whether, as you mentioned, Nezreen, and has come up, or for holidays, a prayer room, if that is possible as well. And the other thing is, I think, being sensitive to non-religious groups. I mean, those that are not a part of any faith tradition, and how we do that. I don't know if you have any comment about that, Nezreen.
Well, I think it's just part of being inclusive. So when anything comes up in the classrooms, I like when things come up organically, right? So if someone shared that their brother died and we talk about it and we Google image to get understanding, I, at the same time, go around the room to have everyone participate on how they celebrate or how they, do this activity. Someone passed away. How does your religion do that? And okay, if you're non-religious, okay, if someone passes away, what do you do? How do you participate? How does that work? Just, it's really, how does that work? Because that's how we understand each other, is that we don't have to agree. I think I had read something in the comments. I think it's important to understand that we don't have to agree on everything. I can't convince Randall to believe everything I believe, and he can't convince me to believe everything he believes. But we can respect each other and listen to each other and go, okay, I don't agree personally, but I understand that this is how you do it, because we are all human. So all things are choices, whether it's religion or culture, person, whatever it is, we have choices. So I think by including everyone in the classroom, we'll include all religions, including anyone who is not religious.
Right. And I think the other thing, and the more that we ask questions, I think we will find that we have more common ground than we really realize. And I think that is great. What I'd like to do is to wrap up this session. Again, Nazreen, it's been a privilege to visit with you and share in the comments of you and others that are participating. I think we've seen a lot of meaningful dialogue. Again, we would encourage people to share any additional comments. But I want to ask you, do you have any final thoughts on this particular topic of how we foster inclusiveness and greater understanding in the classroom or in our communities as a whole?
I think through communication, I think that anyone who's ever had a negative experience or even a negative thought about another person's way of things, it's probably because you've never really met someone from there. And maybe you have, but that one or two people or that group of people doesn't represent the whole, right? So I think the more that we meet people and don't shy away from questions, most people are usually pretty good about answering questions. I feel that if you want to know about people, you need to ask them because everyone is different. You can't really lump up, like I'm Portuguese. You can't lump up all Portuguese people based on me, or I'm American born. You can't base every American on your interaction with me. Hopefully you have a good interaction, but you can't base it that way. People are people regardless of religion, culture. That the more people you meet, the better understanding of the world we'll have.
Excellent. And let's kind of conclude by a couple of other comments that we've had. A comment here, Elizabeth, part of our job is to teach respectful dialogue. Absolutely. I think that is important. Another comment is co-living in a heterogeneous community needs a lot of tolerance and respect. I think that one reason behind rejecting other religions is ignorance and stereotypes. And you've talked about this a lot, and we'll continue to reiterate this. Ask questions, even if you feel uncomfortable. Even if someone asks me a question, at least I acknowledge they tried. It comes from a place of willing and trying to understand me, I think is important. Another question is, Riyadh says, God has given us 2 ears and 1 mouth so we can listen twice as much. I think that's an excellent idea because really we're born for listening. And I think that's so important. Well, Nazreen, and again, we'll certainly encourage people after the show. If we didn't get to your comment, we'll certainly look at that on the show notes and in Facebook. Nazreen, it's been a privilege to visit with you. I think you're a great model as a human being, as an educator, as a person in your community, and as a member of your faith. And so I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Okay. Well, again, we want to thank everyone for joining and for Nazreen. Feel free to reach out to her if you have any additional questions. Again, we have other upcoming episodes on a variety of topics. If you would be interested in being a guest on the show or in joining one of those Zoom meetings that I have, the next one being in September, feel free to contact me, send me a private message. We're all about inclusion. We're all about connecting, and especially in difficult times where people feel a loss of human connection because they feel so far away. I think it's incumbent upon us to try to do the best we can to make this a better world by sharing a spirit of friendship and our humanity. And so thank you very much for joining. I look forward to you